Nasa is an overconfident but delusional loner who couldn't rizz up a girl to save his life. However, everything changes when a hot girl saves him from being the next victim of Truck-kun and forces him to marry her in exchange.
Yes, you and I can be together. If you'll marry me.
Not thinking too much about it, Nasa accepts her proposal. Then he passes out from blood loss, fumbling the baddest girl to ever talk to him. A few months pass as Nasa recovers and tries to get his life together after the accident, giving up on continuing school despite being smart and instead choosing to work at a department store because the only thing that he cares about is the girl who saved him from guaranteed death. He hopes to see her one day and even gets an apartment away from his parents so they would not stop him from working too hard. One ordinary day, Nasa is lounging in his apartment when he hears a knock outside, and to his jaw-dropping shock, it is Tsukasa in the flesh, who reminds him of his promise to marry her. Still in shock, he lets her in as his mind runs wild. Tsukasa pulls out a marriage form and reminds him of all the formal B's they have to take care of before they can get married, and Nasa does not even have time to assess if marrying a stranger is a good decision because all logic flies out the window when Tsukasa smiles at him. Simp mode activated, he fills out the marriage form and the two of them walk out of his apartment in the middle of the night. Tsukasa tells him that they were going to the ward office to officially get married, which was open 24 hours a day so celebrities and horn dogs could get married without getting too much attention. As they walk, Nasa thinks about how she had not made fun of his name like everyone else did, and she surprises him by turning around and referring to herself as Mrs. Nasa, which makes him blush like a girl obsessing over her first idol crush. At the office, the couple take care of all the formalities and paperwork and officially become a married couple, and the man at the office even gives them a small potted plant as a wedding gift. Outside, the reality of what had just happened hits Nasa, but Tsukasa reassures him that she was a good judge of character, and she had surely chosen her knight in shining armor. Tsukasa proposes that they hold hands since they were married now, and the softness makes Nasa's brain go haywire as nasty thoughts about what else he could touch run through his mind, and Tsukasa reminds him that he was blabbing his creepy ideas out loud. She matches his freak and tells him that they were married, so there would be time for grabbing everything eventually, after which she walks off, saying she needs to take care of something. Tsukasa tells Nasa to go ahead and take care of the plant before she returns. It hits the world's smartest idiot that the two of them were going to be living together in his apartment, and in anticipation, he nearly passes out thinking about the two of them in the same bed. Before that can happen though, Nasa needs to do some excruciating brain math to figure out how the two of them were doing to sleep in his filthy bachelor cave, as his bed was not big enough to fit two people, because Nasa had accepted that he would either be single or sleep like a rice plant his whole life. He considers ordering a slightly larger bed off Amazon, but ends up cursing Bezos for not having an impromptu marriage-saving 1-hour delivery option. He gives up and decides to see if both him and Tsukasa could fit in one bed if they snuggled together. Before his fantasies can progress further, Tsukasa returns home and catches Nasa in the act of cuddling a pillow, at which point he nearly passes out from embarrassment and asks why she had not knocked. However, she tells him that she had, but the desperate guy monologue in Nasa's head was too loud to notice. Tsukasa had finished packing her stuff and came back to their apartment with a pink suitcase. Nasa makes her some coffee and not so smoothly asks what she would staying the night with him, and she tells him that they were married, so that was a given. She proposes that she spends the night in a hotel until Nasa figures out the situation and stops having cold feet. However, Nasa runs after her into the night and stops her, feeling like his Princess Kaguya would be gone forever if he did not stop her. Instead, he offers that the two of them go to a home goods store to buy new bedding. Tsukasa agrees, and the two of them make their way to the futon aisle in a huge store, where his new bride obsesses over all the different options and varieties of futons. Nasa is lost in his head thinking about how their first date as a married couple was in a superstore, and he meekly reaches out his hand to grab Tsukasa's to give the shopping trip a more datey feel, at which she smiles and grabs his hand. Then, the newlyweds return to their small apartment and Tsukasa tries out the new bedding Nasa had bought for her before inviting Nasa to join her on the futon. That was when Tsukasa gives his virgin cave a good look and realizes that there were no toiletries or even a spare set of pajamas for her. But before she can have second thoughts about the marriage, Nasa runs off to the convenience store to buy her everything that she needed, except fresh underwear. That would be too much for the virgin simp. When he returns, the two have a brief conversation about why they married each other. Nasa blurts out that he loved Tsukasa, who replies that she shared the same feelings. With that, she goes to the other room to get changed into her new pajamas, and Nasa has the internal battle of the century to stop himself from copping a peek. Luckily, Tsukasa does not take too long to change and enters the bedroom again. Nasa blushes, thinking about how his wife was a literal goddess even in sleeping clothes. Then it was Nasa's turn to change and Tsukasa's turn to get freaky as she asks him to change in front of her, but the flustered virgin bails and changes in another room. When he returns to their bedroom, he has another Doki Doki crisis because Tsukasa had pulled her hair up into a bun. Nasa thought about how it was impossible for his wife to not look stunning. Not too long after, the two finally go to bed. Tsukasa is on the floor on her new futon and Nasa is on his bed. Sleep is the last thing on his mind as he stares longingly at the baddie who had chosen his sorry self out of nowhere. He notices her twisting and turning and realizes that she was a restless sleeper. Nasa wants his wifey to have a good night's rest, so he silently sneaks up to cover her with another futon so she does not get cold. His freaky mind takes over and he tries to cop a smooch but decides that their first kiss would be better if they were both awake. His retreat timing was perfect. He thinks about how Tsukasa must have smelled his onion breath, but it turns out that wifey was just thirsty, and then comes back only to land on top of Nasa. She steals his blanket and passes out, leaving her husband to freeze for the whole night. When morning comes, Tsukasa does not remember why her hair was undone and why she had two covers instead of one. Nasa did not have the heart to tell her, and the two of them change out of their pajamas to get the day started. Nasa nearly gets a nosebleed when he sees Tsukasa change into an apron and casual clothes. To sweeten the deal, she mentions how they were married and they should call each other pet names. Nasa immediately proposes to call her Tsukasa-chan, which after some tsundere contemplating, she agrees to. With that settled, Tsukasa-chan gets ready to cook the two breakfast, but when she opens the fridge to find out that the virgin actually stocked up on food and cooked for himself. This sends Nasa into a nerd spiral as he explains how getting in your nutrients was very important. He had cracked the code which stated that he was to eat hot pot every single day as dumping everything in a pot and boiling could never go wrong. However, wifey was not impressed and gives him a disgusted look because to her, that was science, not cooking. Tsukasa tells him to prepare to get mogged to oblivion as she flexes her MasterChef level skills. In a mere 10 minutes, she had whipped up a breakfast better than Nasa could have in his entire life. The first taste sends Nasa into a foodgown frenzy as he gets excited about his new tasty life with his wife. Things are only about to get better for him when Tsukasa asks to take a bath. Nasa reminds her that he does not have a bath at his place, but there was a nice bathhouse not too far from their place. Nasa gets all giddy thinking about his wife coming fresh out of the bath. However, Tsukasa could not go to a bathhouse empty-handed and asks Nasa if he had any shampoo and other stuff. He proudly shows her his single man Grey 13-in-1 shampoo and soap. This just ticks Tsukasa off, who turns the disappointment into a learning lesson, dragging him to a nearby store where she picks out serum and toner and shampoo among other toiletries. Then, the two finally arrive at the bathhouse only to be greeted by Kaname, who was stunned that Nasa had brought a living, breathing woman with him. She thought the loser only got off to books and calculations. Nasa introduces Tsukasa to her, telling her that Kaname was his junior in school. Now she ran the bathhouse with her sister to help out their grandparents and extended family. After that, Kaname throws around some sus jokes and asks if Nasa and Tsukasa were dating. She was not prepared to hear that they had gotten married overnight. After picking her jaw off the floor, she offers the couple a free bath as a wedding gift, which they gladly accept. However, once Tsukasa heads into the women's section, Kaname stops Nasa and tells him that the deal only extended to his wife. He would still have to pay because his dense self had hurt Kaname's sister without meaning to. She tells him not to tell her sister about his marriage since she would flip out, and Tsukasa agrees. Kaname is not satisfied yet and probes him about marrying a stranger this quickly, to which Nasa responds by yelling and confessing his love for Tsukasa. Kaname laughed at his timing because Tsukasa appears from behind the two and hears him. She had forgotten to take the toiletries with her, which were still in Nasa's hand. She tells her husband that being so open about it was embarrassing, but she would eventually get used to it. With that, she goes back to take her bath and Nasa steps into the men's section. His intentions could not be scrubbed clean with the world's strongest soap as he fantasizes about his life being an anime bath episode. He would soon see his goddess wifey in her birthday suit and the angels would sing. His giddiness only comes to a stop when Kaname shows up under the pretense of cleaning and cops a peek of Nasa's little guy. Meanwhile, Tsukasa finds herself alone in the bath on the women's side and changes into her birthday suit. She thinks that having a bathhouse all to herself was heavenly and steps into the hot water. Her excitement is short-lived as Aya appears from behind the steam to remind her that she was not alone. She makes a big show of ruining Tsukasa's alone time and how she could not let a customer walk away without 100% satisfaction. To make up for it, she offers to wash Tsukasa's back, but Tsukasa tells her that she became jumpy when people touched her. Aya was having none of it and offered to wash her back with a handheld bubble shower instead. Tsukasa finally caves and the two women get all squeaky clean. Tsukasa introduces herself with Nasa's last name, which makes Aya think that she was a sister or cousin of his. She goes on a tangent about how great Nasa was and how he saved their bathhouse from plummeting after their freaky grandpa ran off with some voice actress. Tsukasa does not even have time to consider where to start questioning on that one. Instead, they finish their bath and step outside, where Nasa is dreaming in his sleep. Tsukasa wakes him up, and Nasa realizes that she had already met Aya, which made his job easier. They say their goodbyes and start walking back home. On the way, Tsukasa talks about how pretty Aya was, and the dense virgin is quick to spout a 5-minute speech on how Aya was the perfect girl. This ticks Tsukasa off, but Nasa does not get the hint. He thinks Tsukasa is pissed off because they were walking past a couple getting married. This reminds him of his conversation with Kaname about how he had flopped as a husband. He had not gotten his wife a ring, a dress, or a ceremony. Panic starts to set in when Tsukasa drops another bomb and asks if she could be called pretty as well. Nasa still does not connect the dots and thinks that she was asking for a formal ceremony. His simp mode activates and he hands her the keys to their apartment. He runs off, yelling about how he could not commit right now, but he would make sure that Tsukasa's dreams came true. Meanwhile, his wife is left wondering on the walk back home. A fancy black car pulls up and a girl, Chitose, peeks out and smiles at Tsukasa, calling her big sis. After having made her way home, Tsukasa is bored out of her mind and alone in the apartment for the first time since the two of them had gotten married. She wants to pass the time, so she decides to do some cleaning. However, she finds out that the house was already in tip-top shape. After some debating about whether she should clean every single nook and cranny, she bails on the idea. She did not want to find out some sus secret her new hubby might be hiding in his apartment. She decides to cook lunch before Nasa came back home. That way, she could show her love and fulfill her wifely duties. And so, she gets to cooking. The doorbell rings and Tsukasa goes to answer it thinking it was Nasa, only to be greeted by the blonde brat Chitose, who Tsukasa had rarely ever met before. Despite that, Chitose is extremely eager and refers to Tsukasa as her big sister. She refuses to elaborate in true Sigma fashion and instead bashes Tsukasa for living in such a run-down, shabby apartment. It was clearly beneath her. By then, Tsukasa had had enough, so Tsukasa slams the door in her face and tries to go about her day once more. What she is not prepared for is that Chitose was extremely persistent. Reluctantly, Tsukasa caves and opens the door once more. This time, Chitose cuts the bees and gets straight to the point. She has heard about Tsukasa from their great-grandaunt Tokiko and tracked her down like a bloodhound. Tokiko had told her not to go after Tsukasa, but Chitose did not listen. She was worried for her big sis and wanted to bring her back. This barely phases Tsukasa, who has just about had it. She reminds Chitose that she is married now and that she chose for herself the life that she was living. Her husband Nasa was all that mattered now. This upsets Chitose quite a bit, as she does a sad waddle down the stairs where she sits down and cries. That is when Nasa comes back home and finds the crying Chitose and tries to comfort her. Not knowing who he was, Chitose tells Nasa how a family member had run away. They were making a rash decision that would only make them heartbroken, and that she was too hot to be cozying up with a loser with a sad-looking apartment. Her timing could not be better as Tsukasa walks up behind her and greets Nasa. When the curtain drops and Chitose learns that Nasa is Tsukasa's new husband, all hell breaks loose. She starts wailing and gets angry, going on and on about how Nasa did not deserve her. Tsukasa panics, but Nasa handles it quite maturely and listens to all of Chitose's concerns. He then invites her inside so they could talk it out, but Chitose was having none of it. The only logical thing to do for Chitose was to snap her fingers and have a burly man kidnap Nasa and take him away to their villa. Once they reach the mansion, Chitose tells him that she was not wild enough to torture him, but she was familiar with the ancient way of the homewreckers. She swiftly calls for her two maids, Charlotte and Aurora. She orders them to take tabloid scandalous pics of Nasa with one of them so that Tsukasa would be turned off and leave his sorry self. Charlotte finds Nasa smoking hot and gets too excited about the job. This ticks Chitose off, who starts to lecture the maids, which gives Nasa the chance to escape. As he wanders through the strange house, he thinks about how Tsukasa must have lived there. He ends up finding her room using his scent. Inside the dark room, he finds a rock enclosed in a glass case. Upon closer inspection, he learns that it was an actual rock from the moon, which astronauts had brought back. It was connected to a nitrogen tank so that it would not oxidize and get ruined. However, Nasa's date with the moon rock is cut short when Charlotte appears behind him holding a Dark Soul's 3 Great Sworda and tells him to leave the room. She attacks him in an attempt to drive him out, but ends up cracking the glass case holding the rock. That was when Aurora and Chitose walk in and their jaws drop to the floor. Mr. Nerd thinks fast and fixes the case with some tape and a replacement nitrogen tank. Chitose tells him that the rock belonged to Tokiko, who lent it to Tsukasa. This makes Nasa think about how little he knew about his wife. His rock-saving efforts are rewarded by a hug from Charlotte, which Aurora is quick to take pics of. She then gets to work on photoshopping it to look like a scandalous pic. Nasa remarks how she should quit being a maid and join Hollywood with her skills. Their little banter is cut short when Tsukasa appears and grabs the photo. She seems pissed off as she drags Nasa away. Chitose rejoices thinking that she had succeeded, but it was just a ruse for Nasa and his wife to escape. Tsukasa leads Nasa through a secret passageway. Nasa wonders what kind of secret and stressful life his wife had been living up until then. His thoughts are cut short as the two emerge on the surface inside a beautiful church. All the blood and adrenaline makes Nasa go doki doki as he formally proposes to Tsukasa and then leans in for their first kiss, sealing the deal with a profound yet simple gesture of love. However, the love turns into insanity the next day when Tsukasa gets all hyper and asks Nasa to turn the TV on. When he tells her that he does not have a Tate in his bachelor cave, she loses it. Her favorite movie about skarks in space was set to air that day. Nasa fails to see the appeal, which sends Tsukasa into a cinema buff monologue about appreciating every single director and their work for the full neat experience. Nasa does not really see the appeal, but he has to please wifey, so they head to an electronics store to check out new TVs. While Nasa focuses on the quality of the different products, Tsukasa just tells him to get the cheapest option, since a good film is good regardless of whether it is watched in a theater or a bad setup. After purchasing their TV, the two of them decide to freshen up at the bathhouse. While Tsukasa goes in for her dip, Nasa starts flexing to Kaname about how he had officially proposed to her. Kaname does not see the big deal because that was just step 1. He still had to get her a ring, but Nasa says it was not necessary. Tsukasa was not the type of girl who went after rings. Kaname clocks the tea and tells him that was just a lie wives told their deadbeat husbands to appear nice. He should grow a pair and buy her a nice ring. While Nasa ponders over Kaname's words after his bath, Tsukasa comes out and he finally gets a peek at his wifey fresh out of the bath. He levels up his creep factor as the two of them start to walk back home. On their way, Nasa casually brings up how he had ditched work the day before, so he should really head there today. This seems to upset Tsukasa, who gets sad and takes them to a nearby park. She does not talk a lot after sitting on the park bench and is lost in thought. Nasa finally gets the hint that she would miss him once he was at work and be lonely. However, the blood rushed to his junk, and so all he does is lean in for another kiss. Tsukasa gets flustered and turns on tsundere mode. She tells him that it would be embarrassing if someone saw them. What she did not know is that their ops were around. After that awkward park bench date, Nasa walks Tsukasa home and then heads to work. Before leaving, he asks her if she would be waiting for him when he returned like an insecure helicopter girlfriend. While he is hard at work, Nasa thinks about how his wife must be lonely at home all alone. He felt quite lonely as well and wondered what he could do to close the distance between them. That is when Kaname's words ring in his head and it clicks why married couples buy rings. It is a way to be together even when they are far apart from one another. Both of them can look forward to returning to their loved one. With that, he has decided that he will buy matching rings for him and Tsukasa. When he gets home, he not so subtly brings up the question of whether Tsukasa wanted an engagement ring. His wife is quick to educate him that an engagement ring would be stupid since they were already married. The dense mink is finally schooled on the difference between the flashy engagement rings and the simpler wedding bands for everyday wear. Flustered, he talks about buying 3 rings total for him and Tsukasa to solidify their love. Seeing how she was not getting through Nasa's thick skull, Tsukasa decides to take him to a fancy jewelry store the next day. When they finally go, Nasa is humbled by how expensive even a single carat diamond ring is. He gets all sweet-talked by the salesperson, and she almost swindles him out of millions when Tsukasa pulls him away. Outside the shop on a bench, Tsukasa lets Nasa cool his head instead of buying an expensive ring on an impulse. He is still going on and on about buying rings as a symbol of solidifying their love for one another. Tsukasa realizes that her husband was too stubborn and decides to take him to a slightly less expensive jewelry store. Here, another salesperson is just about ready to scam him out of millions as the gullible Nasa jumps the gun and almost pays. Tsukasa talks some sense into him and tells Nasa that she did not need an expensive ring to prove their love to each other or the world. Just being together was more than enough for her. He ends up buying the cheapest pair of wedding bands that they could find in the second shop. As they walk back home, both of them are content with how things turned out and they hold hands while returning home. Later that night, Tsukasa ends up on Nasa's bed in the middle of the night. Nasa already knew that she was a rowdy sleeper with a habit of sleepwalking. However, that day, instead of stealing Nasa's covers and making him freeze for the night, Tsukasa hopped in bed with him and continued her peaceful sleep. It was too much for virgin Nasa to handle, who started to spoon her and felt her body for the very first time. His not-so-subtle creepiness wakes Tsukasa up for a moment, who proceeds to kiss her husband before rolling back down on her futon and falling asleep. The next morning, Tsukasa is super refreshed, but Nasa could barely sleep a wink after his goddess wife kissed him. He turns his attention to getting a double bed so the two of them could sleep together. This leads him down a rabbit hole where he eventually realizes that their current apartment was too small for two of them. There was no bath, no living room, and not enough space for the two of them to do bedroom gymnastics. He leaves out the freaky part and proposes the two of them moving into a bigger place, but Tsukasa is quick to shut that down. She mentions how she likes the intimacy she felt in the small apartment. They leave it at that for the time being and head to the bathhouse. There, Nasa discusses the situation with Kaname, who tells him that a married couple having different sleeping spaces was not ideal, especially with Nasa being no less than a horse in heat. Kaname smiles when she hears about how easygoing Tsukasa was about sharing the same small space, and then remarks how she would have ended her husband if he was such a deadbeat with a tiny apartment. Later that day, Nasa returns to his apartment after a long day at work, only to walk in on Tsukasa changing her clothes, and they head outside to have a Yoon-level debate on getting a bigger place. Nasa knows the only way to convince his wife was to tap into her nerdy hobbies. He mentions how they could own a big projector to have movie nights. To sweeten the deal, he mentions how he would get Tsukasa big shelves to display her favorite movie DVDs and manga collection on. Just like that, the new place was a done deal for her. With that settled, the two of them start making their way back home. That is when it hits Tsukasa that they would need a guarantor to co-sign the lease on the new place, even if they did manage to find one. Nasa assured her that his parents would cover that, but then realized he had yet to tell them about his secret hasty marriage. When they get home, Tsukasa offers to stay by his side while he talks to his mother to break the news, but he assures her that he would be fine. He calls her and casually lets her know that her loser son was now a husband. Tsukasa overhears him telling his mom how he had married the cute girl who had saved him from getting trucked a while back. When the call ends, Tsukasa gets all flustered and asks what he had told his family about her, to which he replied that he only told them the truth, that he was married to the cutest girl in the universe. This makes Tsukasa blush and the two turn in for the night. The next day, they head to their spot in the park when Nasa gets a text from his mom. She tells him how she had pulled a Sherlock and figured out why he had broken the news of his marriage so abruptly. The jig was up, and his mom said that she would not be his guarantor until he introduced Tsukasa to his parents. While Tsukasa thinks that is justified, warning bells start to ring in Nasa's head. He tells her that his parents were quirky and overbearing, but it needed to be done. And so, Tsukasa and Nasa plan their trip to Nara, with Nasa thinking of it as their honeymoon, which made the trip home much more bearable. Nearby, their ops Charlotte and Aurora catch a whiff of what was happening and report back to Chitose. Meanwhile, Tsukasa tells Nasa that she wants to buy a camera before they leave to meet his parents. It was not to take pictures of the sights, but to journal their daily lives as a married couple. A fresh kink awakens in Nasa as he starts going ham with the Polaroid camera, clicking pics of Tsukasa left and right. He is obsessed with how his wife looks in basically any pose. Tsukasa is not nearly as picky and just snaps a random pic of her husband, who was getting hot and heavy over one of her pics. After their little side quest, the two of them make their way to the bus stop. Tsukasa had refused the first-class train tickets and insisted on traveling by bus, since they would be there by the time they woke up. Nasa gives in and the two of them board the bus, ready to depart to Nara. At the station, Chitose is spying with Aurora and Charlotte and orders them to follow the bus all the way to Nara. She does not care that Tokiko would get mad. All that mattered was being a top-tier homewrecker. Aurora and Charlotte are not enthusiastic but decide to go along. Later that night, Nasa is having a hard time falling asleep on the uncomfortable bus seats. But Tsukasa is out like a light. Just when he thinks the rest of the journey was going to be hell, a speed bump makes Tsukasa rest her head on Nasa's shoulder. Later, the bus makes an hour-long stop at a rest station where Tsukasa gets off feeling refreshed. Nasa is tired beyond relief and is holding a crutch to walk. However, he stops being dramatic once Tsukasa starts to feel bad about forcing them to go by bus, and the two go on to grab a bite to eat. Not far away, Chitose and her maid goons are watching the couple act all lovely-dovey. It is enough to make Charlotte and Aurora swoon, but Chitose cannot wait for their marriage to be cancelled like a season of Firefly. She tells Charlotte and Aurora about the concept of a Narita divorce, where a couple on their honeymoon find the smallest of things to argue about and decide to break up because of it. Chitose mentions how she would not even need to interfere for Nasa and Tsukasa to start hating one another. She squeaks in joy when Nasa forgets his wallet on the bus and leaves Tsukasa standing at the stop alone. While Aurora and Charlotte are not convinced, Chitose thinks that they will slowly but surely fall out of love. Tsukasa stomps on her dreams by going after Nasa and waiting for him while he finds his wallet. The couple then make their way into the food court full of exciting options. When asked what he wants, Nasa picks a generic answer which ticks Tsukasa off, who goes on a tangent about choosing something unique to try since they were out of their regular routine. Nasa caves as he watches Tsukasa try a specialty lime udon while lecturing Nara on the importance of trying new things. However, a single bite reveals that her udon was just soggy noodles with lemon slices on top. Disappointed, she forces Nasa to try a bite, who does not even have words to describe how mid the food was. He then dares Tsukasa to eat a lemon slice while acting cheeky and mentioning the importance of new experiences. When Tsukasa does, he snaps a photo of her with the sour lime in her mouth, making her squirm. Meanwhile, Chitose and the maids are watching them from nearby. Charlotte and Aurora remark how each little hurdle was only serving to bring the couple closer together. Later, when Tsukasa goes tsundere mode because of how Nasa had teased her, Nasa makes up for it by telling her that they would only eat her pics for the rest of the day. This cheers Tsukasa up to quickly finds a melon bread that they share while sitting on some chairs. When she is alone, Chitose appears out of nowhere to confront her about her happy married life. She reminds Tsukasa that she was not who she was pretending to be. Her facade as a regular girl was nothing more than a facade. Tsukasa tells her that all she ever wanted to identity was a normal girl. Before their conversation can continue any further, Nasa returns from his bathroom trip and a celebrity along with a crew of cameramen appear next to them. It was a TAVE show special crew who sometimes shot at rest stations. Not wanting her cover to be blown by being seen on TAV, Tsukasa grabs Nasa and they head back into the bus. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Aurora yank Chitose away to save her from the unwanted attention. She does not go down without a fight and yells after Nasa and Tsukasa. Once they are on the bus, Tsukasa explains that Chitose was not happy about their marriage, which she had already expected, reminding her husband that not every could be pleased. This kind of made Tsukasa worried about meeting Nasa's parents, the potential threat of rejection lingering overhead. However, Nasa does the first manly thing in his life and promises that he would convince his parents to bless their marriage. This made Tsukasa happy and reminded her of the personality that had made her want to marry Nasa. Meanwhile, Chitose is still fuming at the rest station over letting the two get away. Charlotte and Aurora devour their ramen while a celebrity and the camera crew record their late-night show behind them. Aurora informs her that there was nothing to worry about since she had already called for a quality card that would get them to Nasa and Tsukasa in no time. As the night turned into day, a sleepy Nasa awoke to find his head resting on Tsukasa's shoulder, which activates his loser virgin mode. Tsukasa tells him that there was nothing to get worked up over and they should step off the bus now. Once at the station, they realize that they have a bunch of free time before their next bus leaves. Nasa gets excited about all the sights he could see with his wife and make it seem like a honeymoon. However, when he brings up the idea of visiting sites, Tsukasa's mind goes to mainstream bakeries and the manga museum in Kyoto. Nasa was thinking more along the lines of old shrines and historical monuments. This is a big turn-off for Tsukasa, who eventually agrees just to keep her husband's heart. Before they can go about their day, Chitose and the two maids show up like pests and the blonde brat starts yelling at Tsukasa for marrying a deadbeat good for nothing. Nasa reflects on the conversation they had on the bus about winning approval for their marriage. A bright idea strikes him that he would spend the day with Chitosa to show that he was a great husband. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Aurora decide to save Tsukasa and go to cafes and visit the manga museum. After they leave, Chitosa unlocks a new level of tsundere, saying how it would be too easy if Nasa was just rambling and walking around. She wanted Nasa to pretend to be her boyfriend, so she got the full experience. Hesitant at first, Nasa agrees since it would get Chitosa off his back. He quickly flags down a rickshaw and takes her on a romantic ride through Kyoto. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Aurora are sitting with Tsukasa asking her about why she chose to marry Nasa. All she can say is that he was really cute and she fell in love with his smoking personality, how he always lifted up everyone around him. Charlotte bites her lip and tastes heaven just hearing Tsukasa talk about her husband. On the other side of town, her husband stops the rickshaw to buy his fake girlfriend some dango. He pulls out a nerdy binder he had specifically curated for their little stop in Kyoto. He was going to geek his way into Tsukasa's heart. Chitosa is not impressed and mentions how little he knows about his wife. However, every flaw that she points out is turned into a new flirt factor for Nasa. It goes on until Chitosa is frustrated and Nasa comes clean about how Tsukasa had saved his life. He tells her how lucky he felt to meet someone who made him feel whole. The point of their marriage was not to prove that they loved each other, but to keep proving it for as long as they were alive. Chitosa gets clocked and decides to return to Tokyo for the time being. By the time that was settled, it was almost time for Nasa and Tsukasa to board their next train. They get settled in and head towards Nara to meet Nasa's parents. Before they got off at Nara, Tsukasa asks Nasa about his family on the train. He warns her that they were both quirky and weird in their own ways. His father was a famous archaeologist who eventually decided to settle in Nara after Nasa moved out. His mother followed suit and did not question her husband's decision. Finally, they arrive outside the Yuzaki household in the evening. Tsukasa gets cold feet about meeting Nasa's family and tries to bail, but Nasa stops her. At the doorstep, Nasa's mom, Kanoka, stares at them ominously. Nasa quickly runs inside to tell her to stop when she mentions that she is just nervous and scared. She is not emotionally prepared to meet her son's wife, but that was not her call to make. Tsukasa comes inside and introduces herself. When Nasa asks about his dad's whereabouts, Kanoka tells him that he had not moved all day in anticipation. After all the awkwardness, the four finally sit together in the living room. Kanoka and Nasa's dad, Anishi, are both super awkward. Tsukasa and Nasa had brought a gift for them, but they were too shaken up to even thank her properly. Nasa gets pissed off and tells them to act normally, which they make out to be an impossible feat. Tsukasa swoops in like an angel and carries the conversation until Anishi blurts out that the bath was ready. He forces Nasa to take a bath so he could not so subtly talk to his wife without him being there. While Nasa tries to protest, Tsukasa gives him the green light to go ahead. When the two of them are alone in Nasa's old room, he probes his wife about what she talked about, which she slyly refused to disclose. Eventually, she goes to take a bath before they were going to turn in for the night. While she is gone, Kanoka shows up and tells Nasa about the spare futon for Tsukasa to sleep on. She then proceeds to not so subtly mention how their room was right next door, so all bedroom gymnastics should be refrained from since the soundproofing was trash. Nasa barely has time to process this when Tsukasa returns. He is reminded that they were going to be sleeping on the same surface level for the first time ever. When they turn in for the night, he demands that Tsukasa rest her head on his arm and fall asleep, which she does. What the wimp had not taken into account was how heavy a human head was. Tsukasa catches on and teases Nasa about his arm falling asleep. It was Nasa's turn to go tsundere mode as he demands a goodnight kiss from Tsukasa while he keeps his eyes open to enjoy her embarrassed expression. And with that, the two of them go to bed happy. The next morning, Tsukasa is the first to wake up, and after a few glances to make sure Nasa is asleep, she starts undressing. However, Nasa was only pretending to be asleep as he considered it the gentlemanly thing to do. He is not enough of a gentleman to let this opportunity slide though, and takes a quick peek at Tsukasa's hump before getting overstimulated and giddy like a horse on Adderall. Tsukasa guesses that he had probably seen her but does not confront him and steps outside into the bright narrow morning. She is greeted by Anishi, who gets jumpy when she calls him dad. He tells her that it would take some getting used to. After a failed attempt at small talk, Tsukasa tries to fill the silence by asking about Anishi's archaeology career. Anishi jumps at the chance and shows her his study room, which had a mountain of history books and old texts. Tsukasa is super impressed and reads an old script when Nasa comes in thinking that Enishi was boring her. He reveals that Tsukasa hates history, which she adamantly denies because she had worked so hard to bond with his dad. Kanoka rescues everyone from the awkwardness by calling them for breakfast. Once they are all well fed, Tsukasa proposes that she and Nasa go out to see the sights in Nara. While she did not care about history, she could force herself into having a good time by taking photos of Nasa for her journal. Not fully convinced, Nasa decides to go along. The first site that they visit is a giant Buddha statue. Tsukasa catches a photo of Nasa doing the Buddha pose and laughs to herself, saying that she would show it to his dad later. The two of them continue their sightseeing trip to another location where they take a selfie together like a couple. Excited, Nasa proposes that they visit one more location that has been standing for 1,300 years. Tsukasa warns him that there is nothing there, but he does not listen. When they get there, they are greeted by a huge pile of nothingness. Despite her dislike for history, she seemed to have a ton of knowledge about old buildings and the different eras. She schooled Nasa on how the place they were standing at was taken apart due to a material shortage. However, they could still make the most of it by recording a funny video there. Nasa starts acting goofy in front of the camera, but Tsukasa stops recording, telling him that he sounded like a man heading to the battlefield. She laughs and mentions showing all of this to Enishi, at which point Nasa asks how they had gotten so close together. While Tsukasa does not give a straight answer, she had had a deep conversation with Enishi the previous night where he thanked her for saving his son's life. She had given both him and Kanoka hope as Nasa was the source of their pride and joy. They were not ready to lose their brilliant boy yet. Tsukasa promises him that she would keep caring for their son forever. After a day of sightseeing all over Nara, the couple head back to the Yuzaki house to say goodbye to Nasa's parents. Even though it was a short trip, they both had developed and learned a lot while having fun as a couple. They were ready to take a break from the excitement and settle back into their cozy, slow routine. However, fate had other plans for the couple. When they return to their place, they find the landlord and a woman standing outside. The entire apartment had been burned to a crisp by accident. Still in shock, Nasa rushes over to ask if the landlord and the woman with him were unharmed. Once he was assured that they were fine, he rushed to the ruins of his once home to find the potted sapling he had received when he got married. He sighs in relief that it could still be salvaged. Tsukasa watches him from a distance and gets smitten thinking about how he could maintain his cool and care for others in such a trying time. She falls in love with him all over again. Before she can crush on her husband any further, Nasa walks up to her asking if anything valuable to her had been lost in the fire, which she declined. He then proudly told her that he had insurance and all the necessary documents to make sure he got paid for the damages. But for now, he proposed that they go to the bathhouse for a nice soak to wash off the stress, which Tsukasa agrees to. On the walk there, she professes her love for Nasa once more. When they arrive, Kaname is shocked to learn about their apartment being set on fire. What bothers her even more is how nonchalant and low-key happy Nasa seemed over this development. In his mind, he was going to stay with Tsukasa in one of the freaky and shady hotels on the wrong side of town. As all the blood rushed south, he did not even notice Kaname walk in and cop a glance at his meat. She slyly confronts him, and Nasa tries hard to beat the creep allegations. Kaname reminds him that she can see the proof between his legs, which makes Nasa want to evaporate on the spot. Once he was done with his bath, he has a serious conversation with Kaname about what to do, and she offers to let them stay on the Bathhouse property until they could make better arrangements. Tsukasa joins the conversation after finishing her bath, and Nasa is quick to accept. He exclaims how lucky they were to find housing this quickly, but Tsukasa corrects him. He was saved because he was such a good person, so people wanted to reciprocate. Nasa thinks about how he fell in love with a great woman who actually paid attention to him and stuck by his side. His internal monologue is temporarily shut off when Kaname walks them to the property they would be staying in to show them around. Nasa is concerned about imposing, so Kaname double checks with Aya and her mother just to be sure. This is a big relief for the couple, and they later head to the Arizugawa's house to greet Aya and Mrs. Arizugawa. Kaname worries about her big sis, who was still airheaded and oblivious to the fact that Nasa was married. She even teases Aya about what it felt like to live with her crush. Even when Nasa comes in and mentions introducing Tsukasa to his parents, Aya exhibits horror movie level stupidity and does not connect the dots. It is not until Mrs. Arizugawa comes in and drops the bomb of Tsukasa being a wonderful wife that Aya's jaw drops to the floor. Before she could even do something, her first love had ended. She cannot even reminisce on the good times as her mom tells her to just get a haircut and move abroad to make the heartbreak easier. Aya gets pissed at how lightly she was being taken, to which her mom replies that at least her husband did not leave with a younger woman. While the two argue about whose trauma was superior, Nasa apologizes to Kaname for never getting the hint that Aya was into him. Kaname drops some words of wisdom about how it was not his responsibility to cater to someone who was too afraid to confess their feelings. This resonates with Aya as well, who has to decide whether she cries over her lost love or moves on. With a brave smile, she congratulates Nasa on his wedding and takes the mature approach. However, her healing journey was not about to smooth as she decides impulsively on a career as a YouTube idol. A few days of the same tomfoolery go by before Tsukasa explains a new problem: laundry. While most of their clothes had been lost in the fire, the few clothes they did have had been worn since staying with Kaname and her family. Nasa offers to wash both of their clothes, but Tsukasa is hesitant, saying that she does not want Nasa looking at her underwear. Dirty thoughts run through Nasa's head, but he is saved by Kaname, who comes over to call Tsukasa for a quick errand. When they leave, Nasa is left alone with his wife's used clothes, which he eyes like a hungry wild animal. After making sure that no one was looking, he grabs some of Tshukasa's clothes and takes a good sniff. What he did not expect was for Kaname to sense his creepy intentions and hide nearby. She confronts him with a huge grin on his face, mocking him for being nothing more than a simple-minded man who liked to sniff women's clothing. Luckily, she does not snitch and lets the couple peacefully go for their laundry. As the two sit there, Nasa remarks how he had never seen Tsukasa in a tracksuit, which makes her blush. She tells him not to look too closely since all of her underwear was in the laundry machine. This just makes Nasa more determined, who quickly snags a photo for his freaky digital gallery. Nasa remembers what Kaname had told her about going shopping for clothes so Tsukasa could continue being his cute, dainty wife. Tsukasa argues a bit, but eventually decides to go. The two make their way to an expensive store with a ton of clothing options. Tsukasa tries on a short summer dress, which makes Nasa swoon, but he thinks that it is too revealing, and he did not want other men looking at her. A little hot from his possessive comment, Tsukasa asks him to pick out clothes that would look good on her. Nasa jumps at the chance, and a cute montage out of a Disney makeover scene plays before they finish dress shopping. However, Tsukasa was not done yet since she still had to buy new underwear. Nasa tags along and immediately feels like it was illegal for a man to look at all the underwear. Tsukasa sits him down on a sofa and tells him to don the "I'm here with my wife" look. Once they're done shopping, they head outside, but Nasa is still hot and heavy. He cautiously asks if he could see Tsukasa in her underwear, which makes them both as red as tomatoes. Tsukasa says that he can watch her like that anytime he wanted. The conversation is too much for the virgins to handle, and they start talking about nothing and everything to cover it up. Once their steamy embarrassment simmers down, things return back to somewhat normal and slow over the next few days. One night, Tsukasa is cooking up a master chef level meal while Nasa looks at the little setup they had made in the Arisuo residence. Kaname had told them that her good-for-nothing dad used to hoard all the stuff for his nerdy hobbies, and the couple was free to use whatever they wanted. However, once everything had been set up, it became clear that their long-lost dad had been a history buff, with vintage everything stacked in his little storeroom. Nasa could not complain much, since they were living there for free 99. When Tsukasa is done cooking the meal, Nasa is gagged at how good her tonkatsu pork cutlet looked. The pork cutlet was juicy and crisp and definitely on par with a restaurant. Nasa exclaimed over how talented his wife was and how the rest of his life would be spent eating her delicious home-cooked meals. Kaname joins their little dinner party but does not stay long. A guest had dropped off a muskmelon which she wanted the couple to enjoy. She did not leave peacefully and made sure to remind Nasa that they could not hear anything in the main house, so he was free to get it on with his wifey. Horrified, Nasa is quick to make her leave and share the melon with Tsukasa. As they dig into it, they both realize that the fruit was top-notch. Nasa sees an opportunity and tells Tsukasa to open wide so he could feed her. Although she is initially embarrassed, she agrees and chomps down, which sends Nasa to heaven. The two go to bed and wake up to good news. Nasa gets a call from his landlord, who tells him that they were building a new apartment complex on the ruined property, and he could move in on the old rent price without any deposit. It sounded too good to be true, but he and Tsukasa leave to check out a model room, which the landlord had emailed him about. When the two make their way over, they find themselves in front of a fancy high-rise building. They are skeptical whether they got the right directions, but do not skimp on the opportunity and head inside. They go through the luxurious apartment with high ceilings, a bath big enough for 2 newlywed horn dogs, and a queen-sized bed. Tsukasa confesses that she would like to sleep in the same bed as Nasa when they moved into their new place, which has him over the moon. Once they are done with their side quest, they head outside to an email from the landlord who had indeed flubbed the directions to the model apartment. Tsukasa puts Nasa at ease and mentions how she did not care if they lived in a palace or a shabby apartment as long as they got to be together. Nasa smiles to himself, thinking about how he had the best wifey in history to speedrun marriage with. The next morning, Tsukasa wakes up earlier than usual and meets Kaname out front, who is getting ready to clean the bathhouse. Tsukasa offers to help her since they were practically strangers, and she did not want to be a freeloader. Kaname graciously accepts her help and shows her around to the cleaning gear. She makes a big deal about all the techie innovations Nasa had done to keep the business afloat, including a customized cleaning robot. Tsukasa's job was to clean all the places that the robot could not reach in the men's bath area. Kaname and Tsukasa become friendly and start calling each other by their first name. Secretly, Kaname wants to see how well a modern fancy girl would clean up the bath. She is left stunned when she comes to find the bath area spotless. Tsukasa praises her for all the hard work she does before and after school. The two new friends walk outside and Tsukasa sees Kaname off as she heads to school. Just then, Nasa wakes up and finds his wife out front. They both go back to their room, unbeknownst to them. Later that day, Tsukasa asks Nasa what he likes, to which he responds that he likes Tsukasa. She applauds the effort but clarifies that she was talking about food. Nasa's all-in-one hot pot was not going to cut it. Nasa does some more nerdy stats and tells her that curry is his favorite. To this, Tsukasa tells him that they did not have curry powder and that she would make a quick stop at the store. Nasa offers to join and turn the errand into a romantic evening stroll. As the two of them are heading out, Mrs. Arisugawa stops them and calls Nasa over, telling him to take the long route back through a park that was empty at that time. He could let his inner hedon run wild. When Tsukasa asks what the two were mumbling about, Nasa panics and brushes it off, saying that they were discussing current affairs. With that, they quickly leave for the store before Kaname's mom could get freakier. Their evening stroll takes longer than expected, and they end up grabbing a bite to eat. Nasa had unintentionally led them to the deserted park, and Tsukasa was quick to catch on to his actual motives. Nasa tries hard to beat the creep allegations and says that he just planned on kissing her under the starry sky. Not fully convinced, Tsukasa stops him, saying how her breath smelled of garlic from their snack. Like a true simp, Nasa is willing to power through, but Tsukasa was too insecure. Hell-bent on getting his fill, Nasa creeps up behind Tsukasa and hugs her harder than he wanted to. This scares her, but she eventually leans into the romantic gesture. The two have a wholesome chat about how their married life with each other was going so far. The next day, Chitos is back on her stalker game and finds out that Nasa's house had burned down. She is accompanied by Charlotte and Aurora, who do a little snooping around, but have no idea where Nasa and Tsukasa currently were. Fate smiles upon them as Tsukasa walks behind them carrying some detergent. Chitosa probes her about what had happened, but she gets the slip from Tsukasa. She makes up a bee's tale about having to live in a nearby playground to survive. She tricks Chitos into stepping inside the cave on the playground and then disappears as Charlotte and Aurora enjoy the scene. Tsukasa had returned to their temporary abode where Nasa was sifting through the old junk left behind by the girl's father. He had a ton of old consoles and electronics, and even a Mega Drive, which got Tsukasa all hot and heavy. Meanwhile, Nasa got his hands on a strange appliance which Tsukasa tells him is a takoyaki maker. He gets super hyped and proposes a taco party for the two of them and the Arizugawas for all the trouble they caused. They head over to the main bathhouse to tell Kaname, who is immediately on board. Tsukasa mentions how she wanted to get to know Aya better, but Kaname is hesitant because Aya still had feelings for Nasa. Their contemplating does not last long because Chitosa barges in the bathhouse with her maids. She asks Tsukasa if this was where she was living, at which Tsukasa makes a show of lying on the dirty floor and using milk bottles as a pillow. Nasa scolds her for messing with Chitos, knowing that she was a gullible brat. Tsukasa smiles and finally comes clean about living in the house attached to the property. Chitos is worked up and Kaname proposes that they take a soak in the hot bath to cool down. The maids jump at the chance and Chitos is unwillingly dragged into the plan. The three of them have a long, relaxing bath and then cool down afterwards with cold milk. Tsukasa even manages to send them on their way before Chitos returns, even angrier than before. She confronts Tsukasa about living with someone else, and not with her, to which Tsukasa simply replies that they have a Mega Drive console there. Chitose is taken aback and one-ups her by saying she would buy every console under the sun if it meant that Tsukasa would come back and live with her. While it does not work on her, Aya appears out of nowhere after hearing about the gaming consoles. She volunteers as tributee to play with Chitose before formal introductions are exchanged. The bright idea strikes Nasa amid all the noise to invite everyone present to the taco party to make it livelier. Tsukasa hardly agrees but mentions how she would need to make another grocery run. However, Charlotte and Aurora come to the rescue, having anticipated such a situation, and bring with them 2 bags full of groceries. Chitose and Aya bond over how they did not like Tsukasa as Nasa's wife and did not accept their marriage. They went on a tangent about how a good wife should know how to cook despite themselves being terrible cooks. The liveliness continues into the evening, where the taco party has started at the temporary Yuzaki residence. Everyone eats and drinks to their fill even before the takoyaki has been served. After they are done eating, Aya says that the real party has begun and whips out a PlayStation copy of Street Fighter V. They all decide to play against one another for fun, but secretly they are competing against one another. Aya gets super hyped and Kaname reveals that her sister was a big gaming nerd. Kaname tries to play against Chitose and the others, but soon realizes that she is way underprepared to fight the beasts. Eventually, it is just Aya, Chitose, and Tsukasa who are playing against each other. To spice things up, the maids propose that the winner gets a prize. The prize in question was daring Nasa to do anything they wanted, which fired them all up. Aya even gives Tsukasa a wedding gift by seating her in the finals of the game tournament. As Chitose and Aya start to play, she remarks how she would make Nasa do a handstand in the street in his birthday suit so Tsukasa would lose all interest in him. However, Chitose is out before the show can even get started because Aya brutally mogs her and ends up in a KO within seconds. Gagged, she makes some stupid excuse about her controller not being plugged in and demands a rematch. Aya entertains her, but Chitose ends up losing every single time. It is finally Tsukasa's turn to play against Aya, and neither of them are backing down. In the end, Aya wins with a brutal combo and Tsukasa starts whining as well. She pulls a hacks and demand that they play the original Street Fighter since Nasa had made some makeshift special controller to play with. While initially Aya seems to lose, she makes the comeback of the century and the final fight ends with a double KO. The two of them lie down and acknowledge each other as worthy opponents and become friends. Then Kaname reminds them how no takoyaki was being served at the taco party and everyone gets to work. While everyone is enjoying their meal, Chitose catches a glimpse of Tsukasa and Nasa being all lovey-dovey near the takoyaki maker. When her maids question her about her opinion on their marriage now, Chitose finally caves and says that she did not have a problem with it as long as Tsukasa was happy. When it is finally time for everyone to leave, Tsukasa and Nasa promise to host another party soon. Later that night, the two of them are doing the dishes when Nasa remembers the stupid dare that the winner would have proposed if they had won. He asked Tsukasa what she would have done, to which she replied by kissing him. Nasa smiled and said that she could do that whenever she wanted. The next day, things are not so steamy as Nasa gets a call from his work, telling him that their digital systems were down. Despite Tsukasa telling him not to overwork himself, Nasa goes full hackerman mode and starts working on 3 computers at once like it was nothing. Tsukasa cannot do much except watch him work away and offer him the occasional snack or drink. Hours fly by as Nasa finally gets free from work. Then Tsukasa notices that his face was bright red and he did not look too good. She insists on him checking his temperature, only to find out that he had a high-grade fever. Tsukasa tucks him into a futon as he comes clean about not feeling too well and having his body ache the entire day. Tsukasa tells Nasa that it was a classic case of the summer flu and that he should just rest and let his cutesy newlywed wife take care of everything else. As Nasa doses off, Tsukasa realizes that there is not a lot she can do except offer him water, medicine, and some snacks. While he sleeps though, she is quick to take some embarrassing photos of him while he is sick. It is 8 o'clock at night when Nasa finally wakes up, feeling slightly refreshed after the rest. Tsukasa is quick to tend to him and racks her brain over what she could do for her husband. She finally settles on wiping him down before offering him a change of clothes. Embarrassed, Nasa agrees as Tsukasa cleans his body with a wet towel. Things get feisty when she tells him to strip his bottoms so she could clean every part of him, but Nasa's virgin mode activates and he tells her that he could do it. When she insists of more, he pulls a switcheroo and asks her how she would feel if the roles were reversed. Tsukasa matches his freak and mentions how she would not mind if it were Nasa wiping her down. To cut the thick tension, Tsukasa runs off to offer Nasa some fruit. Later that night, they both head to bed in their room and Tsukasa unexpectedly grabs Nasa, telling him how she was worried for him despite it being a common cold. She spoons him and Nasa reveals that he was working extra hard so that the two of them could enjoy the summer festival that was coming up. She is smitten but tells Nasa that she did not want it if it came at the cost of his health. They start making out, but before things can get too freaky, Tsukasa stops him and reminds him that he was sick. If he wanted to be a good little husband, he should keep his hands to himself and go to sleep, which Nasa obeys like a loyal golden retriever. Morning rolls around and Tsukasa is at the bathhouse. Kaname tells her that the two of them should wear yukatas to the summer festival to make it steamier and romantic. Tsukasa does not appreciate the freaky undertone but still takes the yukata from Kaname. When she gets home, she tells Nasa to turn around so that she could change. After much internal struggle, he works up the courage to ask Tsukasa if he could watch her change into her yukata. Shy at first, she agrees to let him cop a peek, but Nasa stares at her like she was that night's dinner. Once they have both changed, they make their way to the summer festival and start looking around at all the fun things they could do before the fireworks started. Tsukasa begs him to get some takoyaki since she was not a fan of the fried ones. She rants about the classic dish until Nasa caves and gets a box for them to share. They both devour the hot takoyaki before making their way to the rest of the stalls. A familiar voice calls them over as they see Cheetos and Aya handling a goldfish catching stand. Kaname had bullied them into helping out. Even Aurora and Charlotte were there, but they refused to help out and just gobbled down food from the festival. Tsukasa talks a big game about being an expert at goldfish catching, but she lets Nasa have the spotlight. His ego deflates like a sad balloon when the net rips before he can even catch a single goldfish. Defeated, the two of them walk away. It is then that they spot a shrine up ahead and decide to pray for Nasa's health and a happy marriage. Tsukasa gets too excited and starts praying for world peace. Nasa confesses that he did not have a lot of people despite his wife who would care about him when he was sick or unwell. Tsukasa comforts him that she would be there till the end of time. They embrace one another and are about to start making out when Kaname stops them. The group had gathered to go watch the fireworks. Nasa hops on the opportunity and takes a group picture of everyone. Later, Kaname yells at the couple to come and watch the fireworks with them. The group gathers on a hillside and enjoys the view and basks in the comfort of friendship and love. Nasa feels like the luckiest man alive. That is it for today's video. If you enjoy the recap, comment below Kaname's freaky undertones. If you like recaps like this, make sure to check out this video right here. I show any of the Diz 3 greatsword weapons. Bishao the cover of the sci-fi show Firefly. Hunger Games reference. Dad the Hackerman meme pic.